I hope, a rich discussion. So for this session, we have Sara Pane presenting on social representation of the new digitalized European public sphere. Then we have Jaesun Kai, techno movement and representation of AI, UK and Korea compared. And then we have Carlos Alexandre Brito, presenting diversity of social representation of artificial intelligence, a comparative analysis across educators from different education levels. So we have three presentations that are, say, dealing with technological innovation or a new advancement of the ICTs. So it's a long, let's say, it's a long path that we have been following already since the beginning of the internet. And then we have another two presenters who are joining us from the other panel where they were left alone. So I'm happy also to say that we will have Eva Müller, presenting individual responses to the global housing crisis, an ambivalent action in an ambivalent space, and Franco Bastias, presenting on social representation of poor people, a comparative study in Germany and Argentina. So we have more or less
presentation change for this moment is technology, science education, and social representation of early elementary school teachers by Davidson Luigi Torassi, Daniele da Silva Maia Gouveia e Alcina Maria Testa da Silva, que sou eu.
D'accord. Because I didn't know about that.
Because it changed yesterday.
Yesterday from today. Okay, so we are for six in 2 hours. It means that we must stay within 15 minutes each. Okay?
And not more.
And we can take some time from the coffee break, of course. But let's try to stay within 15 minutes also to have room for some questions. Okay. So the first presenter is Sara Pane, and I leave you the floor. I just stay here to keep time.
The time. I will also use my phone, so I'm sure that I will not exceed. So I'll try to presentation. No, non si vede la presentazione. No, non capisco perché. Dobbiamo rimetterla dalla... Ci deve sempre essere... Lo vediamo. Perché in realtà dovrebbe...
Non è quella.
dovrebbe essere... Questa è la mia proprio Brest, l'avevo chiamata.
Aspetta. Non è quel file.
No.
Prova questo.
Grazie.
Okay.
So, good morning, everyone. I'm Sara Pane from the Joint International Doctorate in Social Representations, Culture and Communication from La Sapienza. Also, my presentation quite changed today. So, I will present you part of my doctoral research, which is about post-digital European public sphere. And I will focus on social representations of digital transition and AI within the wider framework of the European public sphere. So, just to start with a short premise, why did I choose the European public sphere? Also because the program promotes transdisciplinarity, so the European public sphere is quite a topic that enables a transdisciplinarity approach. So basically I'm merging theoretical frameworks coming from media and communication studies, political science, and also social representations theory. So basically the purpose of my research is twofold. On the one hand is that of enabling kind of theoretical advancements, because today there is no study that approaches the European public sphere using this transdisciplinary approach. So basically social representations applied to the European public sphere is kind of missing, but it is a promising theoretical framework, so it is interesting to see how it can be used in this sense. And then it is the second objective, which is that of trying to find some policy implications, also to go back to think on the implications of strengthening European public sphere in the age of polycrisis and permacrisis. I mentioned some examples of populism, technological disruptions, but also foreign interference and wars, which make even more necessary to think again about building trust and trustworthiness in institutions, which also calls back to think again on the project of the European public sphere. So, few things about this theoretical background. What do we mean by the European public sphere? We mean the transnational transposition of Habermasian concept to the European level, which is quite controversial also, as we will see today during this presentation. Basically, the European public sphere represents the flagship project of European institutional communication policy, which is not a policy. So since the beginning, we can see that there is some kind of problem in the institutional perspective on how to realize this space, because the European public sphere is a normative space, a multi-level space where citizens can get together and discuss of issues of common relevance, as Habermas said in its original version. The European public sphere as such, it is characterized by communicative rationality, but also as agency and creative actions of citizens engaged in this space. The real problem is that Habermas, when he was thinking about the public sphere, he was thinking of national contexts, so of national boundaries existing, so of people sharing values, norms and symbols, which is something that at the European level is kind of missing. So there is no common identity and there is no common demos. So this also shows why this concept is quite of contested among scholars. Indeed, we can find some critics which deny the existence of the public sphere as such, but we can also find some supporters, so scholars and experts, who can say that the European public sphere to some extent exists. And in this perspective, which is also my perspective, we can see two different approaches. First, that of Europeanization of national public spheres, which can be vertical or horizontal, and the transnational model of the public sphere, where the first one is seen as the more doable in the European perspective. And European elections have been framed as a very interesting driver to foster the European public sphere, because it enables the convergence between public spheres at the national levels. Building upon this framework, based on literature analysis, we can say that digital has been playing a big role in the transformation of the public sphere, and we can see impacts in the form of the platformization of society, which has reshaped how citizens interact, how citizens communicate, and also how information takes place, because the three analytical dimensions of the public sphere are those of information, communication, and participation, which will come later in the presentation and also in the data I've analyzed. Interestingly is the presence of this form of techno-enthusiasm that characterized the, let's say, the first part, the first part of the digital transition, so basically Web 2.0, and this idea that digital tools were tools to enable citizen empowerment, but indeed also some key challenges emerged, like that of accessibility, representativity, inclusivity, this idea of digital divides, both physical and cognitive, and the need for regulation at the European level, at the institutional level. What about the new rise of AI? Is AI bringing a disruption, or is AI rather bringing an opportunity to foster this European public sphere and make it less a controversial concept? So what we can see now is that AI technologies and basically LLM like GPT-4 have been entering the public space, the public discourse. They also have been reshaping how citizens interact among each other. And we can see that the three analytical dimensions of the public sphere have been impacted. In communication, we can see the emergence of AI-mediated forms of communication through the use of chatbots and also through the use of international chatbots, which is also a part of my research, both for internal and external purposes, mostly by the European Commission. Then the dimension of participation, with AI applied to deliberative processes as through the use of deliberi, which is an experimentation, but also in the field of information, like the presence of bot and deep fakes, so also causing some problems to the quality of public discourse and raising concerns about ethical issues, most of all about accountability. So basically, who is responsible for misuse of AI, especially when sensitive data are treated, which is also the case of data treated in the public space by institutions, which puts the focus on the need to foster AI literacy and reskilling, upskilling as part of this wider institutional intervention to make AI not a disruption, but rather a promising tool. So what about the use of AI in the public sector? We can see that social representations, what we can say is that social representation can be an interesting theoretical framework, but today there is no application. So there is kind of a research gap. And now we come to the research questions and related hypotheses that characterize my research. First one is how digital technologies and AI impacted the framework of European public institutional communication, considering this communication as the infrastructure of the public sphere, as I said before. And the hypothesis is that digital technologies profoundly shaped the way European institutions communicate with their citizens, and also in the way they set forms and modalities for participation. The second research question relates to the impact of digital transition and artificial intelligence, mostly generative AI, on the European public sphere. And the hypothesis is that digital and mostly generative AI have been impacting the European public sphere to a point the new paradigm in social sciences can be formulated, and in my research it is defined as post-digitality, so post-digital public sphere. The methodology is mainly embedded in qualitative research design. I've done the reconstruction of policy framework related to European public communication, going from 1951 to 2006. Then I've been doing manual qualitative content analysis, identifying themes, frames, following interpretive policies analysis approach, which I found out being quite interesting and also useful to analyze how themes and frames related to digital transition evolved over the year in this policy framework. Then 2 sets of semi-structured interviews with experts, and I used the differentiation of Fonsoest between inside and outside experts, so basically policymakers, civil servants, scholars, journalists and practitioners, so those who define the policies, and then those who are affected by policies. And in doing this, I've selected youth-led and youth-oriented civil society organizations who supported the European communication campaign during last elections, because youth has always been a privileged target of European communication, and also many projects regarding the public sphere deal with youth, so it was quite of a privileged perspective. These participants have been selected through purposive maximum variation sampling, with their, they being distributed across the different levels of EU multi-level governance, so basically European, national, regional, local, and across European regions, northern, it is missing continental, eastern, and southern, and in 5 countries. Then I've done manual and followingly software-assisted qualitative content analysis through NVivo, once again to identify themes and frames, and following this three steps interpretative approach, analyzing first explicit content, then implicit content, and then the not said. So basically, what was I expecting based on research, on literature review, and did not emerge. To triangulate, I did participant observation at the European Youth event in Forlì once again, observing youth civil society organization participants in the framework of last elections, and secondary data analysis of European studies on AI use in the public sector, basically from Eurobarometer and JRC. What about the findings? Findings regarding first research question can bring some interesting insights in showing how digital has been impacting the framework of European public institutional communication to a point to legitimize what has been done here. So basically, a digital periodization of European public institutional communication based on the identification of three different stages: pre-digital, digital, and post-digital. So pre-digital going from 1951 to 2006, in which communication was not digital tools were not part of communication because they were not even existing. So communication at the time was quite vertical, top-down, and mainly diplomatic and informative. With the advent of digital tools, so here I've identified 2006 as the starting point because of an important policy milestone, which is the European white paper on European communication policy, which identifies communication and communication in its relation with digital tools as a potential driver to foster a more horizontal and also bidirectional communication with citizens. So recognizing citizens as active subjects of this communication process, so actively involved in the sense-making also of the European Union. And then the post-digital phase, starting from 2020 on, which mainly focuses on the integration of AI tools also, and in the strong embeddedness of digital tools in everyday life, in citizen interactions. But I will come back to this later in relation to the European public sphere, because it makes it even more clear to understand how post-digital is framed here. So basically, digital technologies as enabler of this transition from vertical to bidirectional communication approach, and a communication which is citizen-oriented, citizen-focused, and where citizens are actively involved in this sense-making process. A parallel study, I also wanted to put a short note here, showed that, however, there is a kind of misalignment between how European institutions frame communication and understand, conceive communication, and how citizens perceive it. So this is also always part of the same research, but not it has different research questions. But it is interesting also to see, because while European institutions frame communication as digital tools, as empowering tools, citizens perceive it differently. So they also put attention on limits. On limits. And hybrid modes of communication remain particularly useful for institutional communication. Here, the findings about the second research question regarding the impact of digital tools and AI and generative AI in communication processes show that AI is particularly impacting on the European public sphere in the area of communication, information, and participation. So in its analytical dimensions, and we can see that European policies tend to frame AI's implication, AI's use for the public sector using familiar frames in their communication activities, like, for example, tool, threat, or ally. So they try also to convey positive images to influence, to have a positive impact on trust and policy acceptance, even though what emerges from data analysis of this mostly comes from the analysis of document of policy framework. What comes out from the analysis of the interviews of the boss sets is that in European institutions tend to approach AI for public sector with what I frame like institutional cautiousness, which somewhat contrasts with forms of grassroots innovation from the bottom-up level. So why this? Basically because of the role of regulation, which is seen also as a constraint. So this is something which has to be considered in this wider framework that we frame as post-digitality, where digital tools, digital technologies, and AI have to be seen, have to be approached with a techno-critical approach, which is different from the techno-enthusiasm, as I was mentioning before, characterized in the Web 2.0 and also Web 3.0, because post-digitality in this research also refers to metaverse and to the rise of a new form of Web 4.0, where this technical, critical approach to technologies is quite relevant. And in the post-digitality paradigm, the limits of digital and AI are filled with online practices for participation, for communication. And once again, this model of hybridization of social interaction seems to be the key to enable further engagement in the public sphere. So with these conclusions and further steps of analysis, we can assess that digital tools have been playing a dual role in the European public sphere, posing both opportunities and challenges, and calling for a transdisciplinary approach to understand how these opportunities and challenges take place. With the rapid evolution of AI introducing uncertainty, mostly in the long-term impacts on the European public sphere, making it relevant to develop foresight and anticipatory governance as thank you, because I'm so sick these days. Thank you so much. So foresight and anticipatory governance as essential in policy making, and this also reflects the approach of European institutions, and mainly JRC, who works on AI implementation in the public sector, and regulation advocacy around AI have to be considered as critical elements in the co-design of policies with citizens, with the need of considering all citizens also as more active in this process, and this is something that is happening at the European level in the way they shape policy about AI, but still some critical elements exist. And also, the last point, the concept of post-digitality, what we saw is that is kind of aligning with this cutting-edge research, merely conducted by colleagues from the University of Urbino in Italy on fringe democracy. So how these fringe platforms, like we could say also Telegram, are impacting democracy and are threatening democracy. So there is this kind of alignment also in concepts. And further research,
Leave them,
stop. Yes. Thank you so much. Stop.
Wait a second. Let's see if we have a couple of questions. Maybe later.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So, next presenter is Jason Kael, presenting on techno movement and representation of AI. So, now bringing the discussion in the same direction.
Yes.
Please.
Okay, so hello everybody, my name is Jason Che. I'm a PhD student from London School of Economics. Today I'm going to talk about my PhD project, which is Techno Movement and Representation of AI, moving from Europe to UK and South Korea.
Is that the full screen mode? It's difficult to see. Is it full screen?
This is full screen. Yeah. So to begin with, when we think of AI, we think it as something neutral and technical. But I would say AI is not only a technological tool, but also a socially co-constructed phenomenon. And one good example of this is the AlphaGo match that happened in South Korea in 2016. So it was a match between AI robot and a Korean Go champion, where AI has won 4-1. And this was a milestone event showing the new technology, but it also caused a huge public attention in Korea, depicting the scene as a shock, a defeat of humanity, and AI even as godlike. And it also brought strong policy responses, so enabling a huge amount of funding for various future projects. And this kind of phenomenon is now experienced globally, as you well know, and not least due to the rise in interest in AI.
It's not presentation.
Shall I carry on?
Going to press this button here.
This is a PDF, not.
Control L. Yeah, that works.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. Thank you. Yes, and not least due to the emergence of ChatGPT and generative AI. So, as such cases show, we can say that AI is socially co-constructed through public attention, media narratives, and various interplay of the actors, and represented by different names at different times. So my research question today is, how has AI been mobilized and represented in society? And to address this question, I have two studies. One, how have media narratives moved and shifted? And second, how has public perception changed over time, comparing the UK and South Korea? But why the two countries? Well, the two countries share some similarities. For example, UK has the legacy of Alan Turing, has one of the leading countries in AI with industrial players such as Google DeepMind, is strongly motivated for revitalization, especially after Brexit and post-COVID. Korea is also a fast-growing tech nation in Asia. It had experienced spotlight by events such as AlphaGo, and is also very strongly performance-driven. But more than that, both the countries share a common geopolitical ground in the global tech race as a strong middle power in the AI race. So the UK is trying to leverage ties with AI superpower, US, but also seeking collaboration and autonomy beyond Europe. Korea is also trying to balance with the rising AI superpower in China, and also trying to manage tech rivalry with countries like Japan and Singapore. So going back to the study one, how have media narratives shifted in two countries? For the methodology, I used media content analysis using 3 major national newspapers for each country. So I looked at around 25,000 articles altogether, and the approach was news search and computational text analysis in R. And for analysis, I looked at 3 main domains, which is AI salience, sentiment, and framing. So first, looking at the salience trends, you can see the graph here. This is a proportional growth in AI articles in 2 countries. Red is UK and blue is Korea. And you can see that AI was gaining prominence in both countries, but has different triggers. So for the UK, there was less initial momentum, but a dramatic peak in 2023, presumably due to ChatGPT. Whereas in Korea, there was an initial surge by AlphaGo in 2016, with smaller enthusiasm later in 2023. And going on to sentiment trends, you can see that for the UK, despite the increased coverage, media coverage, the sentiment declined to negative, rebounding slightly in 2023, whereas Korea maintained overall positive sentiment after 2018, but shifted to negative after 2022 and 3. And next, I tried to look at the framing, but what kind of framing? I looked at 2 contrasting concepts surrounding AI. One is Tina, there is no alternative but to adopt AI. And then second is TAA, the opposite, there are alternatives to options. We have options and choices. But because there was no existing dictionary for these two concepts, I created one of my own manually, referring to relevant literatures and expanding the vocabulary using computational tools such as co-occurrence and word embedding. So I finally made 40 terms each for each concept and each country. And after that, I created a graph of TINA, is a frequency of the terms TINA, TAA, and net TINA, which is TINA minus TAA. And from this graph, I could see that for UK, TINA influenced the earlier periods, but as TAA increased in 2023, it kind of pulled down the whole net TINA. And for Korea, it shows quite fluctuation, but generally TINA frame dominates the whole discourse. And looking closer at net TINA, I could see that the TINA narratives peaked around 2018 for UK and 2021 for Korea. But overall, despite the massive media attention that happened lately, it seems that both countries has declined in framing, but for different reasons. For the UK, it seems that there's a shift from techno-optimism to growing skepticism, whereas in Korea, the initial AlphaGo excitement has faded and lost momentum. So wrapping up the study one, how has media narrative evolved across different nations over time? For the UK, it seems that there was a significant increase in salience in 2023 due to ChatGPT. And even though it experienced constant decline into negativity, the positivity rebounded in 2023. However, TAA has also increased. On the other hand, in Korea, there was an initial increase after AlphaGo event. The country has overall high positivity, but it slowly declined even after 2023, and the enthusiasm has also waned. And this brings more topics to discuss. One, so in the end, has ChatGPT worked as a catalyst for transformation? Well, it surely has seemed to spark a significant attention for both countries. But while in the UK, it provided a turning point in AI sentiment and everything, in Korea, it seemed to suggest a broken hype cycle after the AlphaGo event. And second, what I like to suggest is the change in the TINA narrative. So, as in the analysis before, the UK's TINA narratives encountered growing TAA challenge in 2023, and additional content analysis, so looking at the articles specifically, revealed the signs of TINA's strategic adaptation, so emphasizing risks and concerns before actually going into promoting its agenda, so disguising itself as a sort of superficial TAA. And one example, one event that kind of shows this concept well is UK's AI Safety Summit that happened in 2023. So it was a different strategy to stand out among superpowers, but it also shows a deliberate approach to confront and reframe the TAA and critical views. And now I'd like to go on to study two, how have public perception changed over time? For this, I used secondary data analysis of public surveys in the UK and Korea, looking at 8 different surveys with around 50,000 participants altogether. And for this, I also have 3 hypotheses and concepts. One is agenda setting. Does media coverage affect public awareness and evaluation? Second is awareness or knowledge gap. Do demographic gaps widen or narrow over time? And third is cultivation and framing. So do media use and framing affect public awareness and evaluation? First is UK awareness trends. So alongside rising, it's hard to see, but there's a graph here for media prominence. So alongside rising media prominence, public awareness has also increased. And especially surveys showed a spike in 2023, followed by a plateaued growth afterwards. And second is awareness gap. So with the diffusion of public knowledge, the gap narrowed across different demographics, such as race, social grade, gender, and age. Yes. And then there's evaluation trend. So negative evaluations continue to increase while positivity declined. So thus, positive minus negative gap decreased constantly. And some surveys show that sentiment rebounded in 2024, not 2023, like media sentiment, indicating a lagged response to the media positivity. Next is evaluation gap. So in contrast to the narrowed awareness gap, demographic divide was observed in the evaluation, positive, negative of AI. And then last is cultivation effect. We looked at the media use. So it seemed that media exposure had no effect on AI awareness and minimal effect on AI evaluation. But cultivation effect, according to digital use, showed a different consequence. So unlike other awareness gaps matrix, differences in digital use widened awareness gaps. And AI evaluation was also affected more after 2023. And lastly, the framing. So the media framing trends in the previous years show a correlation with a decline in AI trust in the UK. Now we're halfway, so going to Korea now. Because the long-term survey was lacking, I looked at AI interest as a proxy to AI awareness, and which indicated an increase in AI awareness. And short-term results in AI understanding also showed a rise in 2023, followed by a subsequent decline. Next is AI interest gap, and also as public interest grew, the gap generally narrowed across different demographics, such as region, education, gender, and age. And the next is AI evaluation trends. So after AlphaGo's impact, positive evaluation surged in 2018, but it declined into negativity by 2023, rebounding slightly in the later years. And the AI evaluation gaps also narrowed, like the awareness gap, and demographic differences were also found to be diminished from 2018 to 2024. And finally, framing of TINA. So there was a mismatch observed between media framing and public perception of AI as priority. So in 2016, it seems that AlphaGo's impact drove public priority perception first, and then subsequently influencing the media later. So as a final synthesis, how has public perception been changed and affected by media over time? First, the agenda setting, so awareness increased with media attention. Evaluation changed with media sentiment also, with a little lagging effect in UK. Looking at demographic gaps in awareness has decreased for both countries. However, gaps for evaluation increased in UK and decreased in Korea. Lastly, looking at cultivation, media use seemed to have little effect, but digital use seemed to have an effect on people's perception. And lastly, framing of TINA narratives had effect in UK, but had a different result in Korea. And find the very last page. So how has AI been mobilized and represented in society? It showed a shared pattern that both countries were affected by AI events, which generated media attention and public awareness. However, rising negative sentiments due to uncertainty has increasingly influenced public perception. But the two countries diverged in these points. So UK, not exactly current, but there seems to be high excitement still going on after ChatGPT. But the growing negativity driving shift from TINA to TAA narratives could be a challenge, and widening demographic and digital divides do require attention. For South Korea, the current state seems to be a relatively strong awareness and positive consensus maintained. However, the challenge is declining momentum after AlphaGo era, and there seems to be a need for technological or political breakthrough to sustain public engagement. This is all for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you also for saying that. I don't know if there are any specific questions. No? Okay, so also in this case, maybe we will move to the discussion at a later stage. Sorry?
It's crazy to run through.
No, I'm allowing question. If anybody has some specific question, I'm happy to have a moment for specific question. I said. So, you see, there is no specific question on this presentation. Maybe we can have later a discussion. Thanks. So, please, Carlos.
I don't know why.
Yeah, it's working.
Oh, it's here. It's different here. Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning. How are you? My presentation is about diversity of social representation of AI in my country, specifically in Brazil, because I teacher education there in postgraduating, and this my interest because I research in teacher education professionally. This interesting specifically about technology education in teaching. And this situation is important in part view because there are many aspects interesting. Wow. Research approach, I utilize qualitative, explorative, and comparative. Well, social constructivism is appropriate for exploring meaning-making, influenced by historical and cultural norms. My folks understand how educators construct meanings about artificial intelligence in their professional and symbolic cultural context. But it's different. Your context is large, but this local is important than forms. I would like in here introduction my aim to understand not only what education think about AI, but how these ideas are structured symbolic and cognitively. This is important for me in education. Well, as important is what is in representation or social representation. A system, values, idea, and practice. The first, there are two functions. I would like presenting the data in here and the two functions. And first, establish an order. And second, enable communication with a coach for social. Well, in this case, I utilize the center core theory. The center core explains how social representation is structured around two main components. There, the center core is the first in definition, Moscovici, and the second, peripheral system. It's possible to explain the practice. Include flexible, context-sensitive elements, along adaptation to reality, local reality. individual indifference can evolve without alternative decorum structure. How people think in action? There are dual organization. The core government, what is no negotiable, okay? And the second, beautiful reflect context, adjustment, innovation. Well, you can see my framework. 191 education professional integrate the research. Affiliation is important because who is enrolled in graduate level continuing education? No initial educators. At private higher education institution in my country is biggest difference than compare public education there. Distribution by education, 5 different levels. You can see here the participant, the subject, and here averaging the standard deviation. You can see in here my method. First application 3-word association technique. What is stimulus? What is AI for you? Task, list 5 words. The difference, you utilize, Hatanu utilize 3 to 5. I use everything 5 words. Rate by the importance, the number 1, very important, 2 to 5. But after this, justify the word choice in short sentence explanation. Why use these words? Propose to explore both prototypical and semantic dimension of AI representation. How data analysis, tool, and technique. I use IRAMTech, very long time. I then compare the others because free access is more easy for students for the moment. The pros, limitization and frequency analysis. Construction of 4 quadrant diagrams, the threshold minimum frequency of 2 inclusion. Corpus 955 evocation, but I exclude 19 exclude because my limit to threshold. Okay. Demographic analysis is important in my approach descriptive and the inference statistical in the first moment. Test use crystal analyzing prescribed test for categories variable. Well, and here this rename method is explanation. The words. Concept to use full words, active semantic terms. They are tools when explanation rename. And 2-word context logical elements. And here it's interesting the data. Look the logical and topography of representation. The technique, they are TAC on short terms and correspondence factor analysis. Its space factor is important how explanation the results. Oh, in here, the significance level Q-squared more equal or more 2.8. The objective identify clusters, discourse aptitude, and representation logic. You can see my intention here, syntax the 5 groups. You can see in here center core. Technology appeared in the center core across all groups, the 5 groups in here. Innovation, presenting 4 out to 5 groups. Learn in early children manage. How explanation? In here, it's possible to first function to establish an order. They are order in think about object. The element technology, innovation is symbolic the groups. This second part, this different representation. Early children, elementary, secondary, high, managed, they are lexical difference. Heine, discussion about the lexical word, about different position in discussion, necessary narrative. In here, playful for early children, image-based word like robot and internet. In my opinion, robot is complicated because they're not autonomy. Robot is a machine. Oh my God. How is AI? In my opinion, it's a problem. They're not concepting mean. Elementary practical terms such as speed, autonomy. Well, this is important local, because this is important. How this work it's necessary. Well, AI speed my work. It's automation for my work. This is interesting. But secondary and high secondary, productive autonomy, distance learning. In Brazil, there are many problems in secondary and high because there are the tests, large tests. It is different than comparing early elementary. Higher education, more technical, terms like toll, responsibility. Oh, ethical here. If the others, they're not. Oh my God. And this manager creative organization. Well, reflect this local preoccupation, this work. And reflect the institution perspective, explanation. And the second, enable communication to take place among members of the communication by providing them with a code of social. This is a code. The word indication code. The peers describe about difference, economy, ends, and symbolic. This teacher describe for me, in this case, in this methodology, is what is AI for think about object. And code for name in classifying enables the various aspects of the word and their individual and group stories. Alignment, sects. Oh my God, a long time ago, but interest when exploring this approach. You can see in here, not good, but interest is space factor. What is difference? The 5 groups. They're not, because in here, like, they are 0 point. And here, 0 point, factor 1, factor 2, is the same. They're not different. I hope one group here, just contracts, but not. the different groups is very near, but the lexical word, it's different when spoke about the AI. And here, okay, in here you can see this group, lexical cluster green, it's ethical concern in agents. Interesting. But in here it's bigger in point the statistical, okay, CIRS cry, but it's near for symbolical AI. Well, it's for me, what's the implication that's policy implication? Need for different training program that respect symbolic representation. How the teacher prepared the class. Practical relevance highlights how I is perceived difference across education level. Well, this is, for me, my research theoretical contribution. And in conclusion, AI's symbolic object. No tools, but symbolic project in cognitive. Perception very significant across education level. And the training implication, strategies should consider this difference for ethical critical integration. Well, I would like acknowledge my university for, and thank you very much. This is my email, and this is the photo in Brazil. Thank you very much.
So once again, let's see. Question?
Can I break the ice and just open a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
I want to sit here for 2 hours without saying anything. I think it's a very interesting presentation. I like what you're digging, but we couldn't see very much the result. But for what I understood is when you showed that depending on the professional, whether it's a primary care, or a kindergarten teacher, I'm saying now, or the school manager, they look at AI in a different way. That's what you showed. Am I right in that assumption? You showed that in that phase, so from that person, which are the caretakers, to the managers, they have different associations.
Yes.
That's very interesting. What you're showing is that everybody seems to anchor the AI
Yes.
in their own task.
Yes.
Let's say if I'm a cook, I'm assessing whether AI helps my cooking. If I'm a pilot, I ask myself, does AI help my piloting? So you have different teachers. So I just wonder, are you able with your data to stress more the ambivalence at each level?
Yes.
So what are the caretakers worried about and enthusiastic about? And what are the managers enthusiastic about and worried about? Because that must vary.
Okay, but I don't investigate this.
Okay.
Okay, but it's interesting.
I think that would be
Yes.
a very interesting
Maybe there are differences when positive and negative in this group, no? But in here, in the first exploratory.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
So, thank you. Last presentation. I found the title again. So, thank you. It's a presentation still on technologies. So, technologies, science teaching, and the social representation of early elementary school teacher. And sorry, the presenter is Alcina Maria da Silva. What a long name, as always, with Brazil. So while she is entering the email to find the presentation, I think we can also profit of this moment to, in my opinion, we have, now in this first group of presentation, we are observing, I've noted two things that, in my opinion, are interesting. One is the fact that all the studies are situated, no? But situated also at the geopolitical level. So we are really moving from Europe, and then also comparing Korea and UK, and also explaining the geopolitical tension and the reason why Korea and UK could be interesting cases. So I really like the fact that these studies are geopolitically situated. So we are not talking about AI and in general, but in specific contexts. And these contexts are transnational. What I think, and here is more a question maybe for you, no? What I think is that the way in which we are looking at representation, frame, that we used also several connection with other disciplines, becomes a geopolitically embedded element. So we need to take into account also the bigger picture, I think. And second, of course, the relationship also with communication studies that we saw in the first presentation, but also in the other presentation that we heard. So these are general comments. I don't know if you want to elaborate. There is also Sarah comment on that.
Yeah, what is
Please.
more specific because
Help me.
it's still
Arroba is here.
I would be very interested on how you, because you operationalize this kind of TINA and TAA, right? So, what was how you differentiated? Then it becomes an alternative and not, then it becomes a kind of, there is an alternative and not, there is no alternative. And in relation to what? In general to the system or in relation to AI in general? Or
Well, I think there were diverse aspects in terms of TINA and TAA. Mostly it was about AI because many people are still worried how will it affect in the future, whatever consequence it will give us. But also they're all specifically worried, sometimes worried or less worried because of their own country's benefit. So, and I could see a lot of ambivalence in it as well as the time moved on. Like for example, like I said about the UK, it seems to be about safety, it seems about the risk, but actually if we look inside, we have to use it safely because we cannot avoid it in the end. We have to use it anyway, so how do we deal with it? So there was a lot of discourse and narratives that converge and change, and that seemed really interesting, and especially it was more prevalent in the UK rather than Korea, which also seemed quite interesting.
and they are different. Some people say there are alternatives in the UK and in South Korea. So is there a difference between what are the alternatives or what can be considered alternatives?
I couldn't see much alternatives TAA in Korea, to be frank. I looked at all the articles and it was more like, we are doing this in AI, we're just doing this in AI. So it left, the media kind of left the public to judge, weren't really thinking about the options or choices, whereas UK were much more frank about, AI could do harm to humanity, it would cause threats. What happens if super AI comes to the world? So it was much more specific. But like I said, it was very much ambivalent, and it was interesting to see how the narrative moved on. For example, for the UK, so there was AI Safety Summit, and as far as I understand, there was a French summit this year in February, and the title changed to AI Action Summit. So people kind of changed their discourses or their titles according to what they want to put in front or put in behind. So sometimes they put forward safety, sometimes action, sometimes something else, risks. So it's interesting to see how people change their minds or narratives according to their needs.
I try again.
Yeah.
Okay, so so while we are talking about AI, we have a email failure. So I don't know, maybe so you prefer maybe to try to postpone.
I restructure. I changed my presentation for other day. It's impossible to enter in my email.
Oh no? Why not?
I know, probably provedor.
Oh yeah, I think it's here.
in Rio de Janeiro, in my institution. No problem.
Maybe you can try to solve while we listen to other. Maybe you can try to solve, and let's see if we can.
I have the presentation in cellular. It's possible to show.
Okay, maybe we'll try to solve this technical issue while we listen to the other presenter. So I think I can invite Tunder. Okay, so now we are slightly shifting the topic. However, we are still dealing with transformation. No? So we are moving maybe from a more online into more real life field. But if we are looking at this current situation as a inter-reality, no? In which what we have been talking about AI, as we saw in the last presentation, is not abstract also, no? In the previous one. It has to do with policies, it has to do with education, it has to do with everyday life. So everyday life also involves other issues, which I wonder if AI can solve. Global housing, not at all.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. So let's see how we construct individual responses to the global housing crisis. Please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I changed my title
Come on.
because it's more reflected on this phase of my PhD research. This is one study of my research, what I wanted to show you today. I'm from Hungary, from Pécs, but I will tell a little bit more on it later. Why is it important? So just a little context. In Hungary, 2.8 million people living in housing poverty, which is around 30% of the population, and globally 1.6 billion people is living in some kind of poor conditions or in slums. And for me, it's really important to don't talk about just homelessness, but to housing poverty, which is lack of adequate housing, because I guess you can involve more people in this topic, in this kind of phrase, not just people who are totally lost their homes. So you can build more solidarity with this term. So I'm living in Pécs. This is the Pécs past was a mining past, and after the mines are closed, lots of people lost their jobs and their money. So what kind of possibilities do you have if you don't have money for renting? You can go to the local government, like social housing, you can squat, you can live in a tent, in a garage, in a streets, you can go to a homeless shelter, or if you are a student, you can go to a dormitory, and there is a special area, the weekend garden area, you can build a hut to there, and we will talk about it now. So what is this weekend garden area? It's really close to the city, or it's inside the city. It's originally for recreational purposes. It's like 400 square meter gardens in a really big area with no electricity, water, or gas. You can't have an address. You can't have a garbage collection, postal service. So originally it's for gardening, but because of the housing crisis, people started to move there and self-build some homes there and living there. And around 90,000 people is living in this kind of conditions in Hungary right now. It was a really studied area, which was close to Budapest, but now it's more specific to Pécs, which is not the main city of Hungary, but like around 200,000 people is living there now. So it's a periphery of periphery, which is yeah, it's worse. The situations are worse than in the periphery of Budapest. I'm going to the theoretical framework, I'm going to from the field work, like what can you do to solve this kind of housing crisis? You can make social housing agencies, you can regulating the housing market, you can reconstruct meanings around housing and occupation, like is it so bad if you are occupying a house which is already empty? Should we evict you or not? you can change the representation of social housing or homelessness in social media or media, and you can mobilize and use anti-properties. But all of this kind of research really show that housing markets and risks not just an economic phenomena, but it's deeply an ideological construction. So why is it social psychology? There is a lot of research around homelessness, but around housing policy, which is connect the housing policies and social constructivism, it's not more. That's what I wanted to a little bit expand. But housing policy, so the neoliberal housing policies are really ambivalent because they are like free markets, so it's not really regulated market, but the states are giving money for special groups. So you are regulating it, but it's free. And housing homelessness is a socially constructed concept. And if we wanted to, I don't know, somehow like reveal the power mechanism in this kind of areas, we can really hear the voices of the marginalized groups. And the urban developments or a city is always a battleground of the meanings, like who will determine the future of the city or the past. But now we are talking about the future more. And the meta-theoretical framework is social representation for me, shared beliefs and social narratives from László János, and rational beliefs and rational behavior, Wagner. Like, you can't explain the behavior with social representation, but you can describe it. Okay, I have more phrases. So we went to this, so the first phrase and the explanatory phrase, I don't want to really talk about it a lot. We went to this area, we made interviews with the people who live there, but in the second phase, we made an action research and a questionnaire. Just some results from the first phase. We really just see structural problems in the individual life stories. And I want to really emphasize that people who are living there, they are not consider themselves as homeless people. They have homes, so they are really like positioning themselves for another category. Okay, so I went to this area, we did interviews, and after we have in Page City solidarity architectural movement or program, and every year they are making an action. And this year we chose that we should make a hut or a house in this area. So we start, and this is not, so this is a already existing hut architectural draw. We found this family who lives in this hut, and we wanted to make them a new one because it was not heat protected, it was not water protected, and etc., etc. So we started to plan a new house. We use circular, because we don't really have money, we use circular economic, and we started to like collect different kind of materials. We got like 300 doors, so we really built the house from doors, but we have other kind of offers from small, bigger businesses and from private people. Okay, the construction, it was 2 weeks, more than 100 students participate in it, architectural and psychological students. It was 2 shifts per week, and it was it was open for international students, so sometimes we speak different kinds of languages during this construction. And I had a research question, like, how do this participatory housing project influence participants' view on homelessness? So what is the social representation of homelessness changing these people who participated in this project? We had 54 people filled our questionnaire, and we had a control group with 85 people who were like students too, but doesn't participate in the construction. Okay, this is the questionnaire. We asked democratic questions, representation of homelessness construction, and we really asked that we wanted to reflect for their own housing situation. Like, do you think you are affected by the housing crisis? What do you think about your current housing? Okay, results. So we asked this question, what thoughts, feelings, and expectations come to my mind about homelessness? And the answers, we saw it with, we used Iramutek program, and we made a word cloud, but we can't really see any kind of difference. This is a control graph, and this is the participation. And 6 of the 7 most occurring words are the same. So we are started to investigate a little bit more. We made similarity analysis with Iramutek again. And now this is the control group. We can see that there are different classes. So homelessness is a social problem, so we are distancing it. The homeless people, negative feeling, the exclusion, you can see alcoholism there, physically difficulties like cold, starvation, and help, but this help is with this powerlessness, so it's really like a weak kind of help, so we'll see negative emotional charge and social distance. So what happened with the people who was participated in this project? One of the really interesting findings that we found the self-other relationship. So there is the self who helped, who participated in the project, and there is the other, the homeless people. So the homeless people have negative feelings, but have exclusion again, but not with alcoholism, but with vulnerability, misery, poverty, and has physical difficulties, and the injustice words you can see there. And there is the self who is the helper, and we can see like difficulties of help, so we can see help, but there is the society, so we are not distancing the help, the society, the help, we are the society who are helping. And the negative feeling towards the others, so the people who participated in has feelings for the people who was helped, so we are seeing more nuanced and less fatalistic construction and the self-other relationship. Okay, we asked a supplementary question, is there anything that changed in you during the construction? So it was a last question of the research, the questionnaire, and like 20% of the people answered that something is changed according to the representation of homelessness, like emotional less. So I would say it was a real change to even know that these people are living there. There are no, and to see firsthand the conditions there, like where we made this building. Yeah. So the central core is not really changed, but the structure and the periphery of the representation is, and the people who are participating in the action saw this representation as a relationship with the other person and not just really like concrete stuff. So it's a nice project. We made this, so it's a nice project, but we are a little bit investigate more, and we are really like see other kind of ambivalences like legal difficulties. You can't build a stable home toward this area because of the law. We have family situations. One of the family member argued with the other and frightened us that they want to set it on its fire. So as a social psychologist, what can you do in this kind of projects? There are a dirt road, and we a little bit destroyed it, but after we repaired it, and the neighbors wanted to sue us. There was a family member who was pregnant and smoked, and the psychology students was really like had strong emotions because smoking pregnant woman, and the weather was really bad. Okay, what kind of impact has this action has? Like pros, there is a higher comfort housing for the family. We changed the representation. It was a really big media attention around it. A student had a direct relationship with his family and learned how to use construction tools. Cons, the media representation was really so the media is represented in a really like individual life story. So it's not a structural program. It's just a little family, homeless family is making a better home. The students made a better home for them, but it's really like doesn't do anything with the structural program. So like these individual actions really embed the structural programs, and we really like embedded the family to this environment, which doesn't really have like infrastructure. So there's a nicer house, but no infrastructure again. And how selfish is this kind of help? Okay, we want to help to people, but what is help meaning, and yeah, because we can build huts for everybody, or we can't, but theoretically, but there are 4,000 empty flats in Pécs. So what we should do, and the people who lived in this area would prefer to live in a house, not in that area, of course. So which level should we do something? I show, this is one of the family member with student. This is the house which is ready, and she's Aggie, she's living here now. So some reflection at how and why we do research. So who helps who in a research? Because we are getting information, we are having a career, we are writing a publication, but what will happen to the people who are living there? Because the end of this story, the family lived there for a year, and after they sold the house because they needed money. So, and now they are living again a really poor condition, kind of hut or house. So, like, what is help? There are some help theories, and that's the way I wanted to go further investigate, like what people who wants to help needs to consider before helping or during the helping. Do I have time, or is it over?
No, I don't know.
Me neither.
Couple of minutes.
Discussion.
Okay, discussion.
I thought it was over.
Yeah, me too.
We have some room for discussion, question. I also have one, but yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. Maybe you should be aware that similarity analysis are exploratory methods, so be careful when you are comparing two similarity results, because you can have very different results without any statistical difference.
Yeah.
So be careful.
Okay, thank you.
So if I may also, in the same line, no? I was wondering, for you, but as a general comment, especially in this situation, if we really need, for example, to look at words, occurrence, similarity, because in my opinion, of course, these are very interesting methods, you know that I've been using it, but in this case, the focus is more on participation and, for example, on the ambivalence of help, which has to do more with the relational and interpretative dimension. So sometimes I fear that using this method that are basically somehow destroying and then reconstructing the sentence, take away information, take away something relevant, especially in this kind of approach, where the participation is at the core. So maybe you can tell us more about also the ambivalence and the feeling also of the participant,
Yeah.
which I think are more interesting result.
Yeah, that was a really big concern in myself, because you have to publish and make a conference speech about, and you have to take data. But what is data in this situation? For me, data is what you can see as the data. But we have the questionnaire and what was the best and worst thing about the construction for you? We asked as participants, and that's how we are. Of course, me as an observer is collecting data. But for example, they said that the weather was really bad, and they was poor wet for 2 days. So for me, I'm trying to make science, but I'm really and sometimes I can't navigate, I'm trying to be more really
For example,
academic.
for me here it's interesting the embodied dimension. They are thinking about poverty and the people without home, and at the same time they are experiencing, for example, not having a shelter. So the embodied dimension, so here we are among friends, but I think we can also try to push the fact that these are also relevant data,
Yeah.
and be more confident about that.
For example, lots of people who participate in this project as a student and say that I'm okay with my current living situation are living in dormitories. So we are trying to reflect them that they are also influenced with the housing crisis, but yeah.
In this kind of situation, if you have the possibility to make a before-after test,
Yeah.
I don't know if it was possible for you. Because I think your control group was aware of this project.
No,
No?
they didn't know about this project. There was university students, psychology university students, but didn't know anything about it.
Yes, but how did the students who participate, how did you get them?
Sarah helped me because she's teaching and she offered. Yeah.
You just ask them if they wanted to go to the project and help you to get out?
Yes, it was a possibility. We opened an Excel and they were able to write, and there were 80 people participating from the 100 of this class.
I asked this question because I was wondering if the groups were not different before. Different because some want to participate and some don't want to participate, and they already
No. No.
presentation.
It was like, no.
They
So-
can if they want.
But the control group wasn't the people who don't want to participate. They were different students. We have a lot of students.
But I think one of the interesting issues here at an abstract level is this happening. So happening is for me or happening is for the other, and how a lot of time happening is not looking to the structure problem and making this kind of individual happening, and in this way also maintaining the structural inequalities. So not acting at the political level, but creating, and I think that's the most important for me at least, of this issue. But from the part of the students, it was a nice way of participation, because they're so aware that normally they do not so, because you live in the center of the city, you go to the bar and these kind of things, and then you never see the people who are living without water or this kind of thing. So it was a very interesting moment, the moment that they went there. So they were students coming with their father, in the car, where the professor taking you out,
Okay, thank you. So I think we can move to the next presentation by Franco Bastias in social representation of poor people, a comparative study in Germany and Argentina. Again, a cross-national.
I will need to put my name. If you have an DMA or a pen drive.
I don't have HDMI, so maybe if you have a pen drive, you can do your
No, I
presentation.
don't. Do you? Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for saving the time with your pen drive.
Thanks.
So general comment, bring a pen drive, put the
Yeah.
presentation in PDF, don't trust your own technology.
Especially if you are invited from another session. So, thank you. Yeah, sure.
Yes.
It is. And I will do it fast.
Maybe the last, or maybe if we have time, we can still
Depends on.
we find the pen drive here.
Well, thank you for receiving us here in this session. My name is Franco Bastias. I'm originally from Argentina, and I'm going to show today not EI issues, but long-standing issues with respect to poverty. So this is partially my PhD is a piece of my PhD combined with some collaborations that I have been doing with the pre-university in Hagen, Germany. So I'm not going to go into details with this theory that you are experts on. But just let me highlight that this, according to the social representation theory, social representations are not a mere reflect of reality, but is a meaningful organization shared collectively and generated by a group. So, and here you can see three different typologies of different approaches in social representation theory. So I'm going to develop and use the structural approach of social representation, as my colleague here explained. So he saved me some time to explain this approach and how it's measured, social representations, how social representations are being captured within this framework. So it's basically a verbal association technique. Usually we use this interaction, please write 5 words that comes to your mind when you think of, in this case, poor people, not poverty, poor people, not the poor. And then we can understand the structure of the social representation and content according to these two concepts, the central core and the peripheral system, which you already know probably these theories. I'm not showing something new here, and here I'm doing the prototypical analysis in my study, in which we organize the y-axis according to the order of evocation, not the order of importance, like a re-question sometimes is included, in which participants are ordering the words according to the importance for them. But here the importance is being assumed by the order of evocation. And let me briefly highlight that the contrast zone can show the central core of a different representation held by a subgroup in our sample. So, considering this framework, our research question was, who is considered poor and what deprivations do these people suffer in Germany compared to Argentina? Please don't get too enthusiastic, because it's exploratory study, it's an exploratory study, and I'm considering university students as a sample in both countries. So, but what we know about social representations is that they are sometimes having this function of legitimizing economic inequality and inequalities in general. So, and they might be also underpinning prejudice towards people in disadvantage. And here we have some studies, previous studies on social representations of poverty and poor people from the structural approach that I wanted to highlight. And we are taking considering two different socioeconomic contexts. Germany, on the one hand, with a relatively low income inequality, then a poverty rate of 20%, but with this poverty line, which is around 15,000 euros per year, while in Argentina is 31%, but the poverty, the total income per year is the threshold to establish that if a person is in poverty or not, is established in around 3,000 euros per year. So, and then we have in Argentina the huge problem that 40% of workers are in informal sector, and that in the last 30 years in Argentina was not able to have less than 25% of poverty rate. So our participants were students of social science in Germany and in Argentina, 605, and in Germany 312. And here we have that female, people that identify as female, like they are around 74 and 73%, so it's balanced in that case. So the results, let me show you the results. Here you can see the prototypical analysis in the Argentinian sample, and I don't know, I'm not sure if you can see the words, so I'm going to highlight some of them. Like hunger is the first and most mentioned word here. Also, the central core includes sadness and necessity, humility, and for example, food here. Injustice, no money. So in the central core, we can see hungry as in previous studies as the main element. Also in Chile, Mexico, and Colombia, studies have shown that hunger is the most important element in the central core, at least in Latin American context. And while the periphery is including some elements of multidimensional poverty, for example, housing is there, then education with ignorance and lack of education, and also is including health with illness, for example. So another social right besides the food security and lack of money that we see in the central core. So this is very important to highlight because from the scientific knowledge, we consider the food insecurity as indigence. So it's not poverty, it's like a subgroup, it's the poor of the poor, among the poor, like briefly. So it's like a subgroup within the group of poverty, those who are suffering hunger. And but if we consider, so there is a mismatch here, like a kind of mismatch. If we consider hunger as poverty between scientific knowledge and common sense knowledge, and importantly, like in Argentina, if we think about poverty in terms of lack of food, then we have 7% of poverty. But if we think in a broader concept, we have 31%. So this is also very important to guide public policies. And quote by Asbrook, like broad categories, like for example foreigners, but in this case poverty, can be represented by a specific subgroup of this category, in this case indigents. So the German sample, in the German sample we have some key concepts also in the central core, like hunger, but also homelessness. That was in the previous, in this prototypical analysis, homelessness was rather here in the contrast zone. But for Germans, homelessness has a relatively high importance, and but also little money or lack of money and lack of food, and and also sad, helpless, stress, also appearing as in the Argentine sample. And the contrast zone here include stigmatizing terms as dirty, rags, and so on, and terms related to hygienes. So some similarities and differences across both countries, considering our limitations in our study, of course, is that as most of the literature consider from the first studies measuring poverty in early last century, like in the first decade last century in London, they started to measure poverty in societies, and they define poverty as a lack of money and lack of food. So we can say that it remains in the core of social representation, this conceptualization of poverty as such, and but also like bringing this multidimensional poverty in the peripheral system. So it's kind of it could suggest a process of understanding poverty in different terms. And also, while in the German sample, homelessness and hunger dominate the central core, in the Argentine sample, hunger was in central element, but homelessness appeared in the contrast zone. And I read these results considering that in Argentina, like housing is not as relevant as a social issue as in Germany, because many people are like the new poor, like before were middle class people with houses, and due to 30 years of economic crisis in the last decades, we have a lot of new poors, we call it. So they have house, but they had not enough money to cover their necessities. So, but in contrast with Germany, and here let me share a personal experience, because I have been living in Germany for 3 years, and I have seen a lot of homeless people, like a person suffering for homelessness, and it is usually seen as the poor people. They are the poor, the ones on the street. But in Argentina, the conceptualization is, okay, it could be in an slum, or it could be even in a like proper house in a well-known neighborhood, but being poor at the same time. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. I think we still have time for some questions. Then
One question.
one question, two, and three. Please.
Do you work with Evoque or Iramuteki?
Iramuteki.
Okay. Very yes.
To make nearly exactly the same comments as
I was expecting it.
analyses are exploratory methods, so if you want to show differences, you won't believe them. You just make a key square. You have how many people have said this word in Germany, how many have said this word in Argentina, and make a key square to see that there is effectively differences in the way this word is used.
You mean a T-square, you mean?
T-square.
Yeah, I was like hesitant to do so, because exactly that reason, that they are not, I don't think, comparable in those terms, like the samples, but yeah, maybe could be a way to go.
Also, don't make the confusion between central core and the zone of central core in prototypical analysis.
What, sorry? Some?
Central core.
The central core, yeah.
My accent. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Central core. And the zone of central core, it's not the same.
And the contrast zone.
The zone.
In prototypical analysis, the cell you are calling central core
Yeah.
is called zone of central core because we are not sure that all the elements in this cell are part of the central core. If you refer to the structural theory,
Yeah.
there is 3 tests to
Yeah, right, to check
predict that,
afterwards.
check that. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not exactly
So your suggestion is to call it zone of central core instead of central core.
as it is presented by.
Thank you for your, thank you for your
Thank you.
comment.
Sarah, then again, Martin, Sarah. Sorry.
My question is about the conceptualization. It seems that both in the research of Tunder and in your ones there is this distancing. So, because 30% of you said are poor, but not in poverty of hunger or having hunger, right? Or being hungry. So, the conceptualization of hunger can be a kind of distancing the concept of poverty from ourselves somehow, or people are living in the gardening area and constructing their own houses saying, I'm not homeless, homeless is the other and I am a bit better somehow,
Yeah.
just preserving some kind of,
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, it I have the impression sometimes when I discuss with family and friends, that the intertwined use of homelessness, then poor people, and then indigence. And indigence sometimes is thought as a lack of home instead of lack of food. So yes, I think that this is a good dream.
Thank you very much. A very interesting observation. Before I can formulate my question, can I just clarify if I understand you right? Who did free associate you? Who did you talk to? Can I just
Students of social science. A student of social science.
Social scientists.
No, students of social.
Students of social science.
Yeah.
Okay, that's still fine then. The following question: we students, and we all seem to be living in a meritocracy, which means we become students or making good marks and performing well. Then you get a job because you are competent. Now, people have been arguing that in the context of a meritocracy, there's a tendency to blame the poor for being responsible for themselves. They haven't achieved it.
Yeah.
Which I think is this idea of the deserving poor, which is an old idea, 19th century. So I wonder whether in your free association you get anything that refers to reasons why, attribution of causes, which indicates that people would go for a kind of deserving poor or resources that are withheld, lack of resources.
Yeah.
So it seems to be, because that's the politically relevant element of the whole thing, because politics is then predicated on either doing something about it or not doing something about it. So I'm just wondering whether your data allows you to say
yeah, actually we included a question asking causal attributions of poverty. So then, and I'm not showing these results here, but we run a correspondence analysis, and then we understand how people referring individualistic explanations of poverty are using certain elements in comparison with the sociostructural understanding of poverty and fatalistic, which is the typology that we use. And there is definitely some elements more mentioned. For example, all those elements as in the previous research that we saw from Hungary, like this alcoholism idea, the lack of will, and all those elements are more related to individualistic explanations of poverty, while injustice, for example, as also in your study, like those two elements appear, like in the comparison between the two groups.
Compare?
Yeah.
How does it look in Argentina versus Germany?
No yet with the German case, because we use another scale as attributions, but we will do, yeah, definitely. It's.
I think maybe we can still have time if you want to listen to your presentation. If I may, while you please take place, I also have a suggestion, an idea, something that you said in the very end, when you entered the concept of new poor. I think that with this typology of stimuli, it could also be interesting to use different stimuli, so poor, new poor, and see if there is a difference.
Overlap,
for example, already using a new label can activate, for example, a different attribution and different explanation. Just
a suggestion. Thank you.
So let's try if we are able to.
I'm trying to get off
the last presentation. I don't know, we mixed two symposium and then an extra presentation that was planned for tomorrow. So we will take some time from the coffee break to give everybody enough space to present, if you're able. We are doing our best. Maybe. Maybe.
Difficult. Oh my God.
É uguale, è il mesmo.
Isso?
Sì. No, it's empty.
In my computer.
Your computer, we have the presentation, but
Yes.
it's impossible here.
But
Nothing.
oh my God. Oh.
Okay, no, so I don't know, really,
I
technology is deciding for us.
Oh
so,
my God.
I don't know.
Good presentation. Thank you very much.
I tried a lot of.
Thank you. Sorry for this.
Oh,
There are questions?
no question. It's possible put my.
Yeah, but
You have the, you can ask to find the place tomorrow.
yeah, maybe it's better. Find a place
Better.
tomorrow
Better.
or in the afternoon so
Better.
that you have
Better.
more time also to present. Sorry about that, but
No
I
problem.
well, so if we have still 5 minutes or even more, there are general comments. I think something, just to follow up on your suggestion, something that we have to take into account, especially for the students that are starting now also their presentation, is to be careful about the use of the techniques, no? Especially as regard the connection between different steps. So first exploration and then confirmatory or other techniques that can help if you are in a structural approach actually to identify the different elements. I think this was a...
Maybe we can also make this kind of comments for the use of sentiment analysis on huge corpuses, because I don't know which model you are using, but if there are some models who have been trained before, you have to take care that they have been trained on nearly exactly the same kind of data, because even in this case, they are not completely available, but when it's not the case, if they have been trained on different kind of data, they are absolutely not available.
in my case, I used
Can you raise
Can you,
your
yes, please,
Yes.
stand, if you can stand there so that everybody.
What was the question? We don't hear over here.
We are talking about the reliability of sentiment analysis processes if they are not trained on nearly exactly the same data.
Okay, generalized corpus versus.
So for the sentiment analysis, I used the package that already existed, so a sentimental dictionary of sentiments called Lexicoder, but there are so many other kinds of sentiment dictionaries as well, and they all have different vocabularies in it. Sometimes they get updated or not, so I do understand why you raise this question, but I try to use something that is much more relevant to social science. And for framing, because the dictionary was made by myself, I need to do the validation. So I did a manual validation of me and other researchers looking through the sample of 100 articles and to see if it matched the results the computer gave me. So I thought that would be the least I could do to validate.
This is a good practice to check. Another one is to use 2 or 3 because there is a lot.
Yeah.
2 or 3 and just see if they are all going in the same direction.
Right. For the sentiment, I did use 3 different dictionaries and tried to validate, but I just presented just one. Thank you.
Different level. Another comment that I would like to share, also thinking about the first presentation on the European public sphere, is especially when dealing with some relevant topics, again, like poverty or another relevant, is how to connect also the political communication, the political intention. There is some intentionality behind the construction of a public sphere or the construction of poverty or the construction of AI. So how to connect that dimension of the discourse with, for example, bottom-up data, if you want, or analysis of newspaper. So I think it's important not to lose the fact that some communication, if not most of the communication, has somebody behind. So, okay, we take the newspaper, but who are the publisher? Who are are we able to identify some interest group that are trying to push a specific vision? For example, also, it was interesting in your study, the fact that already at the elementary school, if I understood it correctly, the children are already thinking about productivity somehow.
Not because it's not children, I think it was
Which is only the teachers concerned.
The teachers.
No,
okay, so the teachers are then even worse.
Teachers, no.
But even worse, so the teacher of the elementary are thinking about productivity, which in my opinion is even worse. So which kind of political agenda are they replicating, maybe? No?
Yes.
Also.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to comment about,
please.
well, I don't know the exact actors, but one thing I found interesting was when I looked at the different newspaper articles from 2015 to 2023, I used Lexis platform, which gives you the major actors that is appearing in the articles. And I could see that in 2015, the major actors were more like scientists, academics, and filmmakers, interestingly, and actors, or for sci-fi movies. But in 2023, most of the actors were politicians, like Donald Trump, Biden, Rishi Sunak. So it's sort of very different results as the time went by. So I think that could be an interesting point.
With LexisNet.
Yes, Lexis.
And thank you very much for your intervention. What's very interesting, we have done the same study for France. And actually what's interesting is that in France the mediatization seems to start after the scientists' alerts about autonomous weapons. There was an open letter of Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk, and all this launched the mediatization of we're talking about artificial intelligence, the perils, etc. And it seems that in Korea, but the case was for AlphaGo. I mean, that was the point, yeah. So it's very interesting who influences the discourse about the mediatization. Yeah. And another question I wanted to ask you actually, if you have studied other frames than yeah, because but actually we have observed that the peak in mediatization in France came in 2018 when we had the announcements of strategic plans, of national strategic plans about AI. When everyone, politicians, and we have the emergence of political actors as well, started to talk about the stakes of artificial intelligence, the economic dimensions, and all this stuff. So did you study this as well, or?
Well, I mainly looked at this Korea and UK, so I couldn't know about like the world trends. But yeah, in Korea, because of the AlphaGo, the government started publishing all these documents and policies, and naturally the media picks up and they started writing articles, which makes the media salience kind of go up. So I would say in France it could be quite relevant and similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
It starts with filmmakers and
yeah, it's exactly the
political
same.
actors nearly at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think just add one thing. I think it's really interesting also, as Professor said, to look beyond the mainstream sources, and it would be also interesting for you to look at how information is produced in these fringe platforms. I know that maybe AI is not that much a silent issue, but it would be interesting to see if some counter narratives are produced, because those are like narratives, but also how counter narratives are produced by what actors and by what values behind it. This could be also interesting, I think, because considering AI like also geopolitical power, this could be
That's it.
Just an observation. Your presentation on the European public sphere, is this a European project, or is this your analysis of existing material? I didn't follow that time.
no, because my PhD is funded by European funds, so
Okay.
this is part of it, and then I'm working with a research group which is EU funded. So this is where funds come from. Then I've been, if you also mean how I collect data, I was in Brussels doing my visiting, so I tried, and then during the PhD I've been collaborating with European institutions.
Okay, but it's kind of, it's not a kind of a European conservative group which does an observation in 7 countries.
No.
It's your
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, no.
Yeah,
It would be lovely to do so, but
then my question would be unfair, because I wanted to know what you find about the quality of the public sphere in Europe. But that's too big a question.
now I would say fragmentation is a major point, but of course I think that the major limit of my study is that of representativity, because I could not make, basically I chosen to do qualitative approach because that of AI was a new tool, and I found some methodological approaches very qualitative.
That's fine. But let me just, maybe on the fragmentation, let's do something politically incorrect about fragmentation. Everybody talks about fragmentation, the big devil of the internet. But if you think la psychanalyse, son images en public, there we have l'humanité, la croix, and le monde. Did they talk to each other, or were these fragmented discourses? In other words, when we talk about fragmentation in the 21st century, is that different from having fragmentation of newspaper-driven subcultures into or in Italy, where you had a Parti Communiste hegemonic, and you have a Catholicism hegemonic. Are these not fragmentations? How? Then the question is that I have to ask: How did this ever overcome? How did we overcome this fragmentation? And now we seem to be going back to kind of a status quo ante, rather than into dystopian future. So I'm kind of wondering how we're dealing with this fragmentation as being the problem. Because it might not necessarily be the problem. It's always the problem if nobody in humanity ever talked to a Catholic and no Catholic ever talked to a communist. Then you have echo chambers.
Yeah.
But if these are echo chambers that have connections, then you have actually a situation that fragmentation is potentially converging again. So I'm just wondering when we talk about this fragmentation, as if it would be a ritual of what happens, how we think about these historical dynamics.
This is, I personally, I totally agree, is the problem of, how can I say, inciviltà.
Inciviltà.
Yes, I don't know.
Why? Lack of civilization,
Yes,
what do you mean?
yes, because when fragmentation brings to this the lack of civilization, and there are also some very big projects funded also in Sapienza about this Saraventi about communication, which brings to not being good citizens, behaving properly, let's say, in public spaces. So when fragmentation also leads to this might be problems also for societal order, but indeed, fragmentation could be also good.
I mean, in the European context, fragmentation in relation to public opinion, public sphere, is a fundamental problem. If Italy, Germany, Poland, and the UK never talk about the same thing, which would be national public spheres having no coordination. But sometimes you have an event that suddenly throws up a joint attention, like genetically modified crops.
Yeah.
The food crisis of 1999. Every front page in European newspapers could be shown to talk about Malbouffe. Okay? And then it dissipates again. And I'm sure Ukraine is another of these moments when everybody had front page news. So that's a kind of a different form that is in European public opinion emerging. So the question is under what infrastructure this happens. So I think fragmentation, when you have nationalized public spheres, that's a fragmentation. That's a European problem, which probably continues.
Yes, it's not the application of the Habermasian concept, it's not possible, because it images like unity, and it is not possible. It's utopian. If we want to say, yes, we could have like this form of a unique public opinion, it's utopian.
Okay, you are warmly invited to take a coffee. So thank you so much for